Friends, in today's first reading, it really captured my heart, really touched me, what God tells the people of Israel. God says, "And my people shall never again be put to shame. Then afterward I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. Even on the slaves, in those days I will pour out my spirit." It is so important to have visionaries, to have prophets among us that remind us, that tell us, that show us what is possible, that show us that we can go far beyond what we think are the limits. When I was first called to be in this diocese, right after graduating seminary, Bishop Fisher invited me to try and explore and see if we can begin new Hispanic congregations here in our diocese. In the very first church I served, I entered it with lots of gusto, lots of energy to see what was possible. And the feedback that I kept getting is, "Oh, that can't be done. That's impossible. That may have worked in Springfield, but this is not Springfield. It's impossible, impossible, impossible." And around that same time, I was awarded a grant from the National Church, and I wanted to go to a place that it wasn't impossible. I wanted to go to a place that not just had 2 different services in different languages. I wanted to go to a place that had many. And so I decided to go to Hawaii. Now, it is paradise. There may have been other reasons too, but Hawaii, the Diocese of Hawaii, it is part of the DNA to have services in many different languages. And I wanted to go see how they do it. How did they get that done? And so I traveled to Hawaii and spent about 2 weeks there visiting church after church. And it was common to have a church that had services in many different languages. And one in particular comes to mind. For the sake of this sermon, we'll call it St. Clarence. So I visited St. Clarence, and I got to speak to the rector there, and I got to speak to some of the leaders there. And they had 5 different services, and each of them in a different language. One was in English, another was in native Hawaiian, another was in Tongan, and another in Japanese, and another in Korean. I was blown away. How do you have so many people of different cultures coming in one church, coming together? And I would ask the rector and leaders how they do this. And they taught me 2 terms. One term in native Hawaiian is aloha. I'm sure you've heard of it before. Aloha. It is how people in Hawaii, in native Hawaiian, say hello and goodbye. But it also means one more thing. Aloha in native Hawaiian means I love you. I love you. And can you imagine that? How people say hello and goodbye, and in it is embedded I love you. Aloha. Hi. And I love you. When you say goodnight to your little kids, aloha, love you. That's embedded in it. And in Hawaii, they talk about the aloha way of life. And that got me thinking how embedded in the culture, in the DNA, was this concept of love. And the other word that they taught me was ohana. Now, I watched the movie Lilo and Stitch, so I kind of knew what ohana meant, right? Do you guys know ohana? Ohana means family. It means family. And in it, in the essence and the culture in Hawaii, you have several different ohanas. You have your blood ohana, your family, but you also have your school ohana and your baseball ohana. You have your work ohana. You have your surfing ohana. You have your church ohana. That is part of the mindset, of the culture, that your church is your ohana, part of your family. And so these two concepts, right? I started to kind of, let's daydream about them. And then I asked them again, please tell me, how were you able to have these different services, different people, different cultures consider themselves ohana? How did that happen? And the rector kind of said, it was not easy. It took a lot of work. I was like, well, can you tell me an example of, something? She said to me, well, decades ago, it all started with a refrigerator and some bad food. And I said, oh, wow, okay, tell me more. And she said, after some sort of event, much like any church has extra food, and it's unknown which of the services did this, but they put it in the fridge for later, for other congregations, for other first people to use it. But it didn't get used, and it got left there. Day after day, week after week, and everyone just said, it's the other person, they're going to take care of it. And it just got left there, and it started to stink and smell, and the whole church filled with the smell. Eventually, it was like, what is causing this? And they went in the fridge, and they said, it's this food. And they got upset, and they started talking to them, it must have been that service that did it. And then that service, no, it wasn't us. It must have been that other service. No, it wasn't us. It must have been that other service. And eventually, it became bigger than a refrigerator and some smelly food. It became much bigger than that. You're to blame for X, Y, and Z. No, you're to blame for X, Y, and Z. And there was lots of infighting and division. It was so bad that the rector asked help from the diocese. And the bishop sent a counselor to help kind of figure out what was happening. And the meetings did not go well. And eventually, what ended up happening was that the bishop came to meet with the leaders. And, what happened? And they would say, this other group the reason is why the church is falling apart is because this other group. No, the reason why everything's going bad is because of the other group. The other group doesn't. Lots of division. Lots of anger. And the bishop said, well, how can we continue? And eventually the leader said, we can't continue until that group leaves. And then the other said, no, we can't continue until that other group leaves. The bishop heard this out and said, okay, well, I'm hearing that we can't continue. And I'm so sorry by that. I'm so sorry that we'll have to close St. Clarence. And immediately said, no, that's not what we're saying. St. Clarence can continue as long as they aren't here. Right? And the bishop said, well, just like a building, you can't say there's 3 walls and the building's complete. And just like in a building, you can't have 4 walls but no roof and say, it's complete now. In a church, we can't call it the church unless all of the people that God is calling are there. And what you're telling me is you have a church with 3 walls. What you're telling me is you want a church without a roof. You want an incomplete church. And that's not who God is calling us to be. And so the bishop left and gave them the task of trying to figure out how they want to move forward. And it was around that same time that a major company in the island that they were in, that St. Clarence is in, shut down. And many of the people of all 5 services lost their jobs. And there was a great crisis in that city. And suddenly, there was a great need of help. And the rector kind of gathered the people together and said, there are families here in need of help. Let's put a pause on these discussions and try to get through this crisis. And so they gathered food together, and people started to deliver to the families in need. They started to visit each other. And the rector said that what produced change was the fact that the person that you were saying a week ago did not belong in your church was the one that was bringing you bread for your kids to eat. And the one that you were saying that they should leave, you were going out to their house and visiting their family and seeing their kids, and you were bringing toys and you were bringing school supplies for them. And it was in that crisis, in the midst of that crisis, that St. Clarence began to see itself not as 5 different congregations, but as one ohana, one church family. And about 6 months later, when the bishop came to visit and he talked to the leaders, the bishop had to check, make sure he was in the right church, because there was a different spirit in the place. It was no longer us against them. It was, we are all in this together. And we are stronger when we are together. We are complete when we are together. Our ohana is here when all of us are together. Friends, when I began to explore and discern if I was being called to be your dean, one of the things that made me fall in love with you was that in your search profile, you mentioned that one of your goals is unity among the cathedral. Unity between the different services. And notice I'm using services instead of the word congregation. Because how we talk matters, right? How we talk, the connotations behind the words matters. And the connotation behind congregations is that they're separate, complete units. I like to use the word services, right? Oh, the 8 o'clockers, the 10 o'clockers, the 12:15ers, the Wednesday noon service. Because we are one congregation here at the cathedral. One cathedral together. We are one ohana, one family in Christ. And we are not complete unless we have all who God is calling to be here. Friends, it took that vision from Hawaii for me to be able to come back and begin the work that I felt God was calling me to do here in the diocese. And praise be to God, all honor to God, that we were not able just to start one Hispanic ministry in Worcester, but we also started one in Holyoke as well. Blown away by what was possible. In today's gospel, we get this image of these 2 people, right? One who is saying, God, you're welcome, because I am so good. Right? One is saying, God, look at everything that I do. Oh, I bet you can't imagine someone better than me. And behind those words are, God, you've made me so good that I don't need anybody else. I don't need anybody else. And frankly, you can go and help that other person because I don't really need you. There's very little that God can do with a heart like that. And then Jesus presents another example of a person who is feeling in desperate need of God, in desperate need of his community. And there might be moments where we feel like that in our lives. But Jesus isn't saying that because that's the goal. We should always just feel like we're sinners and I don't think Jesus is saying that's the goal. I think what Jesus is saying is, with a heart that is open like that, God can do wonders. Friends, we need each other. Our ohana is not complete without each other. And we need God. God to transform us, God to lift us up, God to bring us together. In that recognition, in that opening of our heart, even just a crack, God can do wonders. When we recognize the brother and sister, the sibling that we have in each other, and the great love that is offered to us through God, step back. Watch miracles happen. Amen.